So right now you're in Sarajevo this week for the World Uyghur Congress. Now, pretty much everyone watching this show understands that what the CCP is doing to the Uyghurs is genocide. Um, but as I understand it, the U.S. government was resistant for a while of actually applying that label. And you were instrumental in getting the Trump administration to start to call it a genocide. Can you tell us about that? How did you do that?
Well, it was a team sport, so I always resist that label. But I will say that there definitely was resistance, and it required a team in order to overcome it. And even after we got the determination, the lawyers at the State Department continued to attempt to sabotage it, attempted to get it overturned by the incoming Biden administration, and then leaked. Their objections to the determination to the press after the fact, even after Secretary Blinken had reaffirmed the determination. So it was, it just shows you the level of resistance that was taking place inside of the department, primarily from the Office of the Legal Advisors, and lawyers and others in the State Department who were deeply reluctant to actually label what was going on with the Uyghurs as a genocide. And I was very fortunate that we had strong support from the secretary himself, that he had asked for the investigation. He had requested the investigation, and the bureaucracy's mistake was they did not provide him what he asked for. They basically ignored his request and then gave him something that he didn't ask for. And so he turned to several of us in the department who he knew could give him what he was asking for, which wasn't a fait accompli, but it was the argument of what was going on and an assessment of what was going on. And when I say that the level of trepidation about this within the career bureaucracy was such that they would not even answer the question of whether what was happening in China to the Uyghur people under Chinese rule to the Uyghur people was a genocide, that they avoided the question put to them by the Secretary of State. It tells you what we were up against. But as a matter of just, he's the constitutional officer, he's the boss at the State Department, the Secretary of State is the boss at the State Department.
Yeah.
And if the boss asks for something at the State Department, you have two choices. You can provide it or you can quit. And in my opinion, especially as a political appointee, I felt like those were the options. Unfortunately, the career bureaucracy sees a third option, which is you can, try to undermine the secretary. You can pretend like he or she didn't ask for something, or just ask the question that you wish they had asked, answer the question you wish they had asked. So it was an interesting experience overall working in the administration, both during the Bush administration and during the Trump administration. I saw this tendency. It was not exclusively during the Trump administration. So I wasn't particularly surprised by it, but I was shocked by the depths and the lengths that people would go to avoid doing their actual jobs at the State Department.
Why do you think there was that resistance to the label, such that they were willing to ignore a request from the Secretary of State?
Well, I think that there has always been a reluctance on the part of the legal advisor to label a situation genocide. And even when they do make a determination or support a determination, there's always this huge caveat that comes with it, that making this determination doesn't mean that the United States has to do anything just because the secretary has made this policy determination, that it's not technically a legal determination, which again, the circular reasoning there, it's like, okay, if this is not a legal decision, if this is not a charging document, which it's not, it's a policy decision. But if we're not preparing charges in a court of law, then why are the lawyers even involved? And so they engage in a lot of very circular reasoning around almost every genocide determination, because there's a reluctance to commit the United States to do anything if we call a situation at the State Department, if the secretary makes a determination. And so you've seen this on the Yazidis, you've seen this in Burma, you've seen this in other contexts where on even in Darfur, even in Rwanda and Bosnia, where I am now, there was this deep reluctance. So it's not a new phenomenon, and it's not exclusive to this situation with the Uyghurs. But what turned it up to 11 was the fact that it involved China. And so I think that there was an added layer of caution and concern about that, if we actually, what it would actually mean to call out the People's Republic of China as committing crimes against humanity and a genocide.
I'm curious to what the question that the people who Secretary Pompeo had originally asked, to make this, argument. What did they actually come back with?
They came back with a crimes against humanity recommendation, and just completely ignored the genocide piece of the question.
So they just
ignored it.
tried to avoid
Didn't
answering it at
didn't
all.
respond.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
wild. Well, I mean, despite the resistance in the State Department, it seems the Biden administration decided to keep that designation.
Yes, they did.
I mean, you got it like it became official at basically like the last hour of the Trump administration, right? Like right before the keys to the White House were handed to Biden.
Pretty much. The process had been going on, though, for some time, and the secretary had requested that the atrocity determination process be launched months prior to the election and prior to the end of the administration. And for actually the last 2 years of the Trump administration, there had been a lot of internal discussion at the level below the secretary among those of us working on this issue about what to call what was happening there, because it was really difficult to put a name on it. And as someone who has worked on a lot of atrocity determinations and worked with a lot of in a lot of atrocity contexts, I personally was not totally comfortable with calling what was happening a genocide up until about May of 2020, at which point we got the evidence of the population control measures that were being applied in the Uyghur region, because the elements of the genocide required, we saw the intent there on the part of the party, but I was concerned that we didn't have a strong enough case on the elements, and I did not want to do a determination that could be so easily that would be easily overturned or ignored by anybody else, by either the Chinese or other allies, or if there was a change in administration. And so I had been very strongly arguing that we needed to take a pretty cautious approach, and that we needed to be clear that we were meeting the elements of genocide. But once we got the evidence that we got hard evidence that the Chinese party state, was trying to reduce births within the Uyghur community to sub-replacement level. And if you put all of the pieces of the policy together, it showed how they were targeting the Uyghur population for population reduction to below replacement level. That was enough for me to then go back into the process and say, I think that we now have enough that that there are enough elements there that we can start to put together a formal package to make a determination. I knew it was not going to be easy, and my colleagues, we all knew it was going to be difficult, but I felt like that gave us the strongest chance with the boarding schools, that they were sending Uyghur children to boarding schools, and the birth rate efforts, the population control efforts, that we could make the hard argument. Because so many people associate genocide with a huge mass killing event that we were making a somewhat novel case, not according to the elements of the convention. The convention's very clear on this, but I think that because it is a policy and ultimately a political and policy decision, we did need to have really strong evidence. And once we had that strong evidence regarding the population control, I felt comfortable pushing for the determination within the system, which then sets off a process that took about 6 months.